NASA receives $24.8 billion a year from the American government. $24.8 billion. To give you an idea, that's more than the annual GDP of over 80 countries. Every day that passes, NASA spends the equivalent of $68 million. Every hour, $2.8 million. Now think about it. An organization that operates with this budget, with more than 17,000 direct employees, with confidential contracts with the American Department of Defense, with access to data that no government in the world possesses, do you think everything they know reaches you? I'm not talking about conspiracies. I'm talking about something much more real, much more documented, and much more disturbing. I'm talking about protocol, about NDAs signed by scientists, about information classified not out of paranoia, but out of deliberate institutional policy. And today, someone who was inside this system will show us exactly how it works. But this is not the story you are used to hearing. The story you know goes like this. NASA discovers incredible things, publishes scientific reports, holds press conferences, releases beautiful photos of the universe. Total transparency. Open science. Progress for humanity. This story is true, and at the same time, it is completely incomplete. Because there is a second layer. A layer that former employees describe in sworn testimonies, in books published after retirement, in interviews that almost no one covers. A layer where the most important questions are not answered, where the most disturbing data is classified, where the decision of what you know is made by a committee you never elected. And the strangest thing of all, the scientists who work there often don't know what happens upstairs. But here's where things get really strange. You've probably heard rumors, you've seen sensationalist headlines, you've dismissed it as a conspiracy theory. I understand. But what I'm going to show you in the next few minutes doesn't come from obscure internet forums. It comes from declassified official documents, from testimonies of former employees with full names, from research published in peer-reviewed scientific journals. And at the end of this video, you'll understand why certain questions never come up in NASA press conferences, not because the answer is impossible, but because the answer changes everything. There is a theory, and I need you to pay attention to the word theory, because I will be distinguishing all the time between what is fact, what is hypothesis, and what is speculation. There is a theory called the Protocol of Silence. It's not a secret document with that name. It's a pattern of institutional behavior identified by researchers who have been studying NASA's scientific communication for decades. The pattern is simple. When a discovery is too big to be processed by the public without causing social panic, economic instability, or a crisis of scientific paradigm, it goes through a narrative filtering process. It doesn't disappear. It's not destroyed. It's packaged. Packaged in a way that preserves social stability while experts decide what to do with it. It's a theory. But what isn't a theory is this. This process has happened before. Documented, named, dated. And that's exactly what we're going to see now. In 1958, when NASA was created by the American Congress, a clause called Section 304 was included in the founding law. This clause stated the following, and this is a public document. You can check it right now in the American Congressional Archives. NASA has a legal obligation to inform the public about its discoveries. Legal obligation. Now comes the anomalous detail. In 1967, less than 10 years later, an internal operational regulation also documented called NASA Policy Directive 1600/2 was approved. This directive established categories of information that could be withheld from the public for reasons of national security. National security. In a civilian space exploration agency. Wait a minute. An agency created to explore space transparently and for the benefit of all humanity has national security regulations. Who saw this when it was published? Which newspaper covered it? And more importantly, what exactly was being protected? I went looking for that answer, and what I found was even more disconcerting. I found researchers, I found documents, I found testimonies, and at a certain point I found something I didn't expect to find, former NASA employees who decided to speak out. Not in Hollywood, not on sensationalist podcasts, in formal testimonies, in academic books, in sworn statements that cost them careers. One of them is Dr. Edgar Mitchell, the sixth human being to walk on the moon, PhD from MIT, founder of the Institute of Noetic Sciences, someone who dedicated decades of public life to serious science. In 1998, he said in a recorded interview, "There is information that the American government possesses about unidentified phenomena that has never been shared with the public. I know this from sources within the system itself." Now you can dismiss that. You can say he's old, that he's lost touch with reality. But before you do that, I need to show you what happened after he said that, because the institutional reaction was revealing. After Mitchell made that public statement, NASA issued an official statement. The statement did not say he was wrong. He presented no data contradicting the statement. He only said that Dr. Mitchell speaks for himself, and his statements do not represent the official position of the agency. A perfect corporate response. Vague enough not to lie. Specific enough not to confirm. I filed it away. And I went looking for more. In 2017, something changed. The U.S. Department of Defense confirmed the existence of a secret program called AATIP, Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, a $22 million program, secretly funded for years, dedicated to investigating unidentified aerial phenomena. $22 million in a secret program. What phenomena were they so concerned about that they needed to hide them even from Congress? And here's where NASA comes in again. In 2022, NASA itself announced the creation of an independent study group on UAPs, unidentified aerial phenomena. NASA itself, the agency that for decades said there was nothing to investigate, created a study group. He published a report in 2023. But the report, and this is crucial, concluded that the existing data is insufficient to draw conclusions. Insufficient data. In 65 years of space program, with $24 billion a year, with the most sophisticated instruments humanity has ever built. Insufficient data. And it was precisely at this point that I found the piece that changed everything. I'm going to separate what is proven fact from what is hypothesisist, because you deserve this distinction. Facts. NASA Policy Directive 1600.Land 2 exists. It's a public and verifiable document. The AATIP program existed. It was confirmed by the Department of Defense in 2017. Edgar Mitchell made the quoted statements. They are recorded and archived. NASA created the UAP study group in 2022, and the report was published in 2023. There are NDAs signed by NASA contractors. This is standard in contracts with American federal agencies. Hypotheses, unconfirmed but supported by circumstantial evidence, that specific information about discoveries was withheld from the public for reasons that go beyond technical security, and that there is an active policy of narrative management in discoveries considered potentially destabilizing. Speculation, without solid evidence, that NASA possesses confirmed knowledge of extraterrestrial life and deliberately hides it. I make this distinction because the goal of this video is not to convince you of anything, it's to ask you the right questions. Now let's think about the implications of what you've just seen. If an agency with a legal obligation for transparency has internal mechanisms to withhold information, if a former astronaut with a PhD from MIT claims to have knowledge of data concealment, if the American government itself secretly funded for years a program investigating phenomena that officially did not exist, what else is being managed? I'm not talking about ETs. I'm talking about something much more concrete. Decisions about planetary resources, about climate change in space, about the risks of asteroid impacts, about discoveries that could change global geopolitics. In 2029, an asteroid called Apophis will pass less than 32,000 kilometers from Earth, closer than some satellites in orbit. NASA knows this. They publish this. But what calculations do they not publish about the long-term risks of this type of event? Who decides what you know about threats that could affect your life? I know what you might be thinking right now. But what can I do with this? This is too big for me. I understand that feeling. But here's the point. You pay taxes that fund space programs. You live on a planet whose risks are monitored by agencies that you fund. You make political decisions based on information that is filtered by institutions that you don't control. It's not about ETs. It's about informational sovereignty. It's about your right to know what is being decided on your behalf. And that's a debate that society needs to have. Now, but there's a question that nobody is asking. A question that, if you ask it, completely changes the perspective of everything you've seen so far. And the question is this. What if NASA isn't hiding because it knows too much? What if it's hiding because it still doesn't know enough? Think about it. What is more destabilizing for humanity? A space agency that found life and didn't tell anyone? Or a space agency that, with 65 years of existence and trillions of dollars invested, still can't explain phenomena that its own instruments detect? The second option implies something that the first does not, that the limits of our knowledge are much closer to us than we have been told, that official science is more lost than it admits, that the narrative of human control and dominion over the universe is, in part, an institutional fiction. That is the forbidden question. In 2023, during a hearing in the American Congress, a former intelligence officer named David Grusch made a sworn statement, under penalty of perjury. With whistleblower legal protection, he stated that the American government has programs for recovering materials of non-human origin that have not been disclosed to Congress, not to the public, to Congress, to the body that should oversee these programs. The official response was, "We cannot confirm or deny." Neither confirm nor deny. That's the most loaded phrase in American institutional language. It's not, "That's a lie." It's not, "That man is wrong." It's, "We can neither confirm nor deny." And in the same year, NASA published its UAP report saying the data is insufficient. Now you have two pieces of a puzzle that the mainstream media hasn't connected. An intelligence agency that says it can neither confirm nor deny the existence of non-human materials, and the world's leading civilian space agency saying it doesn't have enough data. How can both things be true simultaneously? And then I understood. The question was never what they know. The question is who decides what you have the right to know. So what do you do with that? First, don't confuse transparency with truth. The fact that information is public doesn't mean it's complete. The fact that an agency publishes reports doesn't mean it's revealing everything it knows. Second, follow the money, not the headlines. The $22 million allocated to AATIP didn't appear in the main budgets. They were buried under defense headings. That's a pattern. When you want to understand what an institution truly prioritizes, look at where the unannounced money goes. Third, pay attention to non-answers. The language of "we can neither confirm nor deny" is a red flag. Corporate responses that neither contradict nor confirm are different from responses that explain. Fourth, be wary of overly clean narratives. Real science is messy, full of contradictions, unexplained data, and anomalies. When an institutional narrative is too perfect, when all the pieces fit together too easily, that's cause for suspicion. You don't have to believe anything you saw today. In fact, I'd rather you didn't. I'd rather you verified it. The documents exist. The testimonies exist. The congressional hearings exist. Everything I've cited here has a verifiable public source. Develop the habit of asking not only what an institution says, but what it doesn't say. Not what's in the headlines, but what's not in the headlines. This isn't a conspiracy theorist skill. It's an informed citizen skill in a world where information is managed by institutions with vested interests. NASA isn't the villain. The Department of Defense isn't the villain. They are systems. And systems manage information according to their own incentives. Understanding this doesn't make you a paranoid skeptic. It makes you harder to manipulate. So, what is NASA preventing you from saying? The honest answer is, we don't know for sure. But we do know there's a gap between what they collect and what reaches us. We know that gap is managed by protocol, not by accident. We know that former officials who tried to reduce it paid a professional price for it. And we know, because the documents themselves prove it, that the boundary between civilian science and national security is far more porous than the public narrative suggests. That's the answer to the question in this video. But it opens up a bigger question, one that will stay with you long after this video ends. If the most powerful institutions in the world manage what we know about the universe, what else are we being gradually prepared to accept? Not as a conspiracy theory, as a historical pattern. Because history shows us that humanity's greatest revelations about our place in the cosmos, about our origin, about our insignificance in the face of the universe have never been revealed all at once. They were dosed, packaged, prepared so as not to break the social fabric. And this raises the most disturbing question of all. When the next dose arrives, will you recognize it as a dose? Or will you think it's the whole truth?